Hi, welcome to the Also Called podcast, where we're asking hard questions about our place in this hectic world.
Join us as we dig into the truth about who God is, possibly discovering that we are also called.
Welcome to the Also Called podcast. In today's episode, we're journeying into what it means to follow Jesus. Join us as we discover what a disciple is, how we follow, and what it means to be under a teacher, asking, are we called too? So get ready for the journey into the heart of Jesus for his students. Let's get started. I'm Andrea, and I'm learning to appreciate the significance of what a disciple actually is.
And I'm Mia, and I'm still learning after 30 plus years of what it means to follow Jesus. And that darn flesh just gets in the way somehow. So I'm thankful for God's grace and mercy. So today we have a really good friend of mine, Lori Nickel, with us to talk discipleship. So Lori, can you introduce yourself to us and our listeners?
Hi, my name is Lori Nickel. As Mia said, we've been friends for a long time. We just reconnected in the last few years, and it's been amazing. God brings people into our lives for seasons and times, and it's been definitely a time. My family left the Dallas area, big city life to support the grass-fed meat industry about 6 years ago. And it's been a journey. God has taught us a lot. He's still teaching us a lot. I count myself blessed. I have 3 children, a husband who is an airline pilot and travels for a living. We have horses and dogs, but my 3 kids are my first ministry. Of course, my husband too. They are 20, 17, and 13. So we are busy, but we are blessed. I have a degree in kinesiology. I've used my education and work experience under a naturopath doing coaching, ministering to the health and spirit of others, and trying to grow my business in ministry and targeting, supporting clients' health and nutritional journeys. I love the beach. You can find me there anytime I can get there. In the daily life, I love horses, so I'm outside a lot and always enjoying time with my family and my husband.
Thank you so much for doing this and for joining us today. And I'm really excited about this conversation. I think it's a very needed one in this time. So let's start out defining what is discipleship. What does it mean? So I feel like the first thing we need to clarify is disciple is not the same as apostle. They are 2 very different things. And I secondly think that it's a very deeply personal, but very universal. So is it just somebody who believes in Jesus as their savior, or is it more than that? Unfortunately, in the 21st century, we've somewhat lost the way of what a disciple is. So Grace Theological Seminary has this great article called What is the True Meaning of Christian Discipleship? And it says that discipleship meant so much more than just transferring information. It is actually imitating the teacher's life, inoculating his values, and reproducing his teachings. And in our Martha chapter, Kathy talks about a disciple of the first century of a particular rabbi or master was much more than just studying under him. It was committing to being just like him. So when he taught, you would contemplate his every word, you would study his facial expressions, and you would even mimic his hand gestures. So it's a very different idea of first century and 21st century, but I don't think it's supposed to be. So that's the conversation that we want to have today. Let's jump in. So let's talk about what is a disciple.
For me, I had to look up the definition between disciples and apostles because I need something to grasp onto. Like, I know in my mind, I think apostles, I think the 12 disciples that were with Jesus. The definition of disciple is one who embraces and assists in spreading the teachings of another. The other definition was one of the original followers of Jesus, which also makes them those were the apostles in my mind. A disciple of Jesus, in my mind, is a dedicated follower who just spends their life learning from Jesus, imitates his teachings in life, is committed to spreading his word, and creating relationships with the Father and with others. Disciples are, in my mind, simply lifelong learners, and we are learning the way of Jesus and how to teach others to do the same.
So honestly, gosh, I am in my 40s. I was raised in the church. Until being a part of this project, I don't think I ever sat and contemplated what a disciple actually is. It was either I thought about the 12 disciples because we knew the 12 disciples hung out with Jesus. But in my mind, it's like, cool, they didn't have a job. They just walked around. Awesome. I can't do that. or this negative connotation with it. Like that's just a disciple of so-and-so, meaning like they don't think for themselves. They just regurgitate whatever this other person is saying. It's obviously like way off base. They don't think for themselves. They give that person all the authority. So it just had a negative connotation for me. Honestly, I never really thought about what being a disciple really meant. And starting the project, as far as starting the book portion of it, was in the middle of a very tumultuous time in my life. I was separated from my husband, and I actually was a part of a church, and they started doing a Bible study, Adorned, living out the beauty of the gospel together. So I thought, okay, fantastic. So this is a Bible study where women are discipling each other. I attended for a couple of months, and I have uncomfortable transparency. and so I would share like each week, separated from my husband. I can't wait. In this state, you have to be separated for a year before you can file divorce. So like I'm telling these ladies, it's a countdown. I'm going to be filing for divorce. And these women didn't know how to respond to me. We took a break during the summer, and I actually reached out to a few people to say, so every week I'm sharing my prayer requests. Like I'm struggling in life right now, and no one's reached out to me. Well, I'm a little discouraged because we're reading a book about doing life together and discipling each other. And not only is it hard for me to read, it's in the book of Titus. So if you haven't read it, you should probably do it with somebody and with a lot of prayer. So there's a lot of stuff in my flesh that I had to struggle with, especially me being in this situation where I was with my husband at the time. Yeah, I never really thought about being a disciple in a positive way.
Well, unfortunately, having been in ministry for 35-ish years now, worked at multiple churches, and only one church had a discipleship program specific called Discipleship. It wasn't just Bible studies, groups, whatever. It was intentional. One of the challenges of discipleship is, like you said, it's messy. It's doing life with people. It's leading somebody who sometimes is combative, sometimes doesn't believe what you believe. Sometimes it's somebody who's really slippery and they're struggling with addiction or they're struggling with things. So discipleship is messy. We see that in the Gospels. If you look, Jesus, they pushed back on him on some things. They didn't believe. It wasn't easy. It took them 5 times before they got it, and questionably did they ever get it. So I think that's one of the challenges with the whole issue of discipleship is it's messy, and I don't think a lot of people are open to being into other people's messes or sharing their own messes. So I just have to wonder, is that some of why we're not doing it super well right now? So going back to, I love Simon Sinek, and in his thing, he says you always have to know your why. Your why is what keeps you in the game. So why do we pursue discipleship, or why do we follow Jesus, and who is he, and what is our need?
It's a deep question. Who Jesus is to me, he's my savior. He sought me out when I was still a sinner. He saved me from myself. Before I knew I needed saving from myself, he filled a hole in me that I didn't know I had. I mean, I knew in a way that I had it. I always tell my kids, we're all born with a God-sized hole. A lot of people have no idea what that means until they find Jesus. They're trying to fill it with other things like money or traveling or addictions, or they just know they need something else, but they don't know what that is until they find Jesus. And Jesus is so good at filling that void in our lives. Like he loves us so much. He came, he lived, he died just so we could have a relationship with the Father. And to me, that's everything. He's not only my savior, but he's shepherd, my teacher. He is the Son of God. He's the awaited Messiah. He was crucified and resurrected for our salvation. He is the way, the truth, and the life. I follow him because he loved me first. He offered me forgiveness. He offered me purpose, the salt, the life, like everything that I never knew I needed. That's Jesus. He's our perfect example of what it means to be a Christian, how to love God first and how to love others and how to make disciples. And he showed us perfectly how to fulfill all of it.
Absolutely. I feel exactly the same way.
Yeah, so aside from God as the creator of this beautiful world that I have the privilege of being a part of, for a being to have that type of power and the thoughtfulness when you look at nature, how everything interacts together and all that stuff, like all of that aside, if we just look at Jesus, why do I follow him? Because he embodies everything that I don't. It's wisdom and love and patience and self sacrifice, commitment, all of these things that I want to aspire to be. I want to be able to love people that do harmful things to themselves or to other people. I want to be able to care for those people who need to be cared for. I follow him because I see in him something that I know is better for me than what I would choose for myself.
Well, I love it because you guys both hit on who he is. He is the Son of God. He is the promised Redeemer that can reconcile or that can make up the difference that can get us to being in right relationship with God. And then, Andrea, you look for the Son of Man, the one that you can identify with and can identify with you and be everything that you can't be and make us better. So I love that you guys both hit on two of his major attributes.
But how exactly do we follow Jesus?
For me, it involves a daily surrender because I am a sheep and I get distracted all the time, literally between the kids and everything else I want to do in life. Like I have to daily surrender to God and just ask him to give me guidance through prayer, help me to prioritize that day, just striving to live according to his word. And I've got to be in his word every single day because I'm human and I forget things. And sometimes it takes me multiple times to learn just from one single verse. It's about building a relationship with him first and making choices that align with his will. And I can only learn that through learning his word and really talking to others, building relationships with others where iron sharpens iron helps me understand. But it's a daily commitment to live according to his teachings and his guidance. And I just have to be still, to sit still and listen for his still small voice and just learn what he's saying. For me, it's not about adhering to a set of rules, but it's developing a relationship with him.
Yeah, I very much agree. If we look at the Gospels, there are some common characteristics that we'll always see that all of the disciples that followed Jesus, they loved. They loved God above everything else, and they loved others. They followed and imitated Jesus's life and his teachings. They committed to the mission. They started denying themselves and were willing to continue doing that. A lot of them were suffered and persecuted, and then they shared the good news. That's what we need to look like. We need to look like our master. He did those things. We saw his disciples do those things, and we will do those things. And I found this really cool guy, Eric Metcalf, is wrote on apprenticeship, and I really liked it. He basically said there's 5 steps. He says the first one is I do as the master, and you watch as the disciple, and we'll talk. And I found that in Luke 6:12 through 19, we can see Jesus doing that. The teacher taking their apprentice with them. They demonstrated the skill they're trying to teach, and the apprentice observes, and then later the two talk what happens. The second step is I do, you help, we talk. And we can see that in Luke 9:10 through 17, where the teacher does the lion's share of the work, but gives the apprentice the chance to help in a small way. And then they debrief again, what worked, what didn't work. The third one is you do, I help, we talk. Luke 9:37 through 43, the apprentice takes the lead, but the disciple is there to help guide and give help when needed. And then they do evaluation at the end. The fourth step is you do, I watch, we talk. Now the apprentice fully leads, and are they ready to launch out on their own? And that comes from Luke 10:1 through 12, and then again in 17 through 20. And then the final stage is you do, and someone else watches. And it's the apprentice who's now become the master or the leader, recognizes that it's not enough to lead, but they have to multiply themselves and create more disciples. So I think that's a really cool breakdown. And that comes from 1 Peter 5:13. It's a really cool breakdown of what discipleship should look like. Is, a lot of us, and we were talking about this earlier before we started the episode today, about, what was our discipleship experience? And most people don't have that experience. They just go, and see a service on Sunday and then don't know how to walk it out, and they don't know what it looks like, and they don't know. One of the things that we talked about is discipleship is a journey. So when they mess up, they just walk away. Can either one of you talk a little bit about your discipleship experiences, and did you have that same setup, or did you have something different?
I have to say, I'm so thankful I witnessed my parents' relationship, their marriage. So I did have that relationship with my parent, but again, a child, if that's the only place you're getting discipleship, I mean, that's wonderful. It's amazing, and it is a blessing for parents to be that for their children. But to your point, Lori, it is so important for us to have community. Even if we think back to Jesus' time, their culture, it was multi-generational and it was community-based. So there were other people to speak life into those children. My parents loved me unconditionally. I think I've mentioned this before in one of the other episodes. I banked on that unconditional love. And so it wasn't necessarily, I was heavy on the grace. I wasn't necessarily looking to, like you said, Mia, suffer or sacrifice or deny the things that I wanted or wanted to participate in or what have you. Because if I go do this thing, it's okay. My parents are still going to be there and they're still going to love me. God's still going to love me. As far as discipleship, those steps of apprenticeship, I think you can be in different levels with different relationships. And so it's not like, I don't want anyone to think that they can't serve if they haven't reached nirvana. They haven't reached that final step. It's okay. And I can use our relationship for that. We met when I was just looking to get plugged in. And I didn't know I was going to a group to be taught to launch a women's ministry and me host a group. Like, that's not what I signed up for. And so after the first meeting, I was like, Mia, no, this was not what I thought it was. And you were like, oh, just keep going. And next thing you know, I'm hosting a community group at my house. And it was such a beautiful experience. I'm still friends with some of those ladies today. And I've lived in North Carolina now for 4 years. And honestly, being a part of a group like that, whether I was participating in it or serving, I've missed so much. Like, back to that God-sized hole in our heart. Like, he creates us for something. And it's to walk with people. And some of those people are going to be refining us, and some people we're going to be refining.
Or both.
That's true. So for me and my discipleship experience, I mean, I became a Christian in 8th grade. I really had no maturity in 8th grade. I really didn't know what I was doing. And I did have people come alongside me initially and start, like, they had verses for me to memorize, and they wanted me to come to Sunday school. They wanted me to get involved with things at church. And I mean, that was, I guess, how I grew and learned at that age and stage of my life. But then I went to college and I kind of fell away because I didn't have the maturity to say, hey, I need to stay in church. This needs to be my priority. It wasn't intentional. I didn't leave intentionally. I just got lazy and I wanted to sleep in on Sundays, and I didn't want to go by myself to church. And so I never really, I lost a lot. I lost some years in there in high school and college. And then coming back when I had my first son, I realized at that point in my life, it wasn't just about me. It was about raising my kids in the church. And so I made it a priority to get back in church. I will say there was an expectation I felt when I went back to church. There was just this expectation where I needed to start serving anywhere, somewhere. But there was still never like an intentional discipleship. I've never really been involved in any church that had an intentional discipleship program. Preparing for this podcast it was tougher than I thought, because I know the concept of discipleship and I understand it from a biblical perspective. And I've seen it through different relationships in my life with my parents. They were obviously trying to mentor me. Now, they weren't Christians, so they were doing it from a worldly perspective, and they did the best they could. But I never really had a godly mentor in my life who just walked with me and taught me what it looked like, what it meant, how to be a godly mom, how to be a godly wife. We went to classes, I've done Bible studies, and I've learned a lot on my own, but it's never been walking with somebody else who's been there, who can just, I love just people who can impart wisdom. I seek it everywhere I can. And I've been very intentional about putting my kids in programs and in places to learn underneath somebody, a godly mentor, whether it's through sports or what other activities were available, but just putting them under a godly person who could mentor them. I found that very important for them, because I never had that example. I've learned a lot through preparing for this podcast that I don't really know much about being discipled. Funny story, this summer I started referring to the area that I live in as Nineveh. And just as a joke, joking around. And then I was like, oh, I heard God say community. And I'm like, oh, you want me to do something here? Okay. So he had me start a Bible study in my community with some other moms who have been seeking the Lord, who are at different stages in their Christian walk. And I've facilitated Bible studies in the past, but it's always been with more mature believers. And this is like a group of women who are just very different stages. Some of them are just new Christians who are hungry for the word and hungry to know how to pray and hungry to know how to do all of these things. And so it's a learning process. How do I teach them these things? And really just seeking the Lord on, okay, Lord, what is it you want to say? What is it that you want to do? That's been my experience of discipleship.
I love that you've already taken it to that next stage where you're now discipling. That's amazing. I think I have had the opposite of both of you, because I'm so tenacious with my questions. I don't let it go. So when I first became a believer, I was asking questions and kind of forcing myself on a lot of people to disciple me, just so my questions could get answered and I'd leave them alone. But I'm thankful that everywhere we move, I can think of, I had an amazing mentor, Marianne, in Texas. I had an amazing mentor, Martha, in Hawaii. I'm just really thankful that I've always seemed to find my way, or it's the Lord, always puts a mature woman in my path to say, okay, let's talk about motherhood. Let's talk about, because none of that came natural to me at all. I really had to work hard. So that's why I think I have such a passion for discipleship. And that's what this book is all about. It's about women in the first century have the same issues as women in the 21st centuries, learning how to be a disciple. So thank you guys for sharing that. And I'm excited that this was an opportunity for y'all to learn more about discipleship, and me too.
Now that you say that, I look back on I'm going to start crying, some amazing women that God put in my life, and they're no longer with us. So I guess I still am learning what discipleship truly is, because when you ask that question, I think about mostly in the church organization, discipleship training, and what I learned there, or what have you. You talking about other women in the different areas that you lived, there have been a couple of amazing women in my life, and I'm so thankful for them, because I learned so much from them. And I'm also so thankful that, and even for you, Mia, to this past season of my life, where I am completely losing it and I call and I'm using all the words and there's no judgment there. It's just, she's just getting us out, and then you bring me back. And I have these women to just say, okay. And they can give me a loving and graceful response and gently point me back to the only place where there really is wisdom and peace to be found. And that's only when you quit trying to control the situation and give it all to God. You just triggered that. And so I have been discipled and continue to be discipled. It's just not necessarily within the church building.
You and I know exactly who you're talking about, Miss Gina. I think about her, and some of the women in my life have let me be the hot mess, say the stupidest words that a human could ever utter, and they still let me boo-hoo on their couch or on the phone, and then pick me back up and said, "Okay, well, let's take this to Jesus." So I've had the same thing, and I loved Miss Gina. Oh my God, I love Miss Gina.
All right, so true confessions. I do have some ladies in my life who also, yeah, y'all are bringing those thoughts to my mind. Like there have been elder women in my life who have come alongside me at certain times, and they have been amazing. They are full of wisdom and just so kind to redirect me to logical thinking. Like, when we become a hot mess, we just get so emotional. We're like, we can't think logically.
I love that. God is so good, isn't he? That he doesn't leave us where we are, and he is graciously brings these people
Mhm.
who aren't going to run screaming from the building when we come in. So how do we know that we're a disciple?
I never really thought of myself as a disciple. Really, I thought of myself as somebody who just needed to learn more about Jesus, and a daughter. Abba is my father and Jesus my example. And I never really thought of myself in that context until now. I follow him. I listen for his voice. I spend as much time as I can in his presence because that is where I find my rest and my comfort and my strength and my joy and my peace and everything that I need to fulfill being a mom and a wife and all of the things that we are. But I'm also, it's that being transformed by the renewing of your mind and the reading of his word, it's bearing fruit, taking our thoughts captive, demonstrating through our words and our actions what he's producing in our lives.
Like you, I don't think I really ever considered myself a disciple, even back to when I hosted a community group. And I still use that word. I hosted a community group. I never looked at myself as being a disciple, and certainly not teaching anyone else to do anything, because I actually, most of the time, we used Bible studies, like topical Bible studies. It wasn't something like I'm opening the Bible and imparting any knowledge because I needed it myself. I still would struggle with disciple from the aspect of there's something that I need to learn, and I'm curious and I want to learn and I want to do better. From that aspect, yes, I can say I'm a disciple. Am I ever going to be comfortable thinking that I have something to teach someone else? Probably not, because I feel like I'm the driving the struggle bus.
And I love you for it because I'm exactly the same way. When I sat down and was really thinking about how do you know if you're a disciple, I just think it all comes down to humility, is that you need something more than yourself, need a savior, and then just learning and practicing and stumbling forward and sometimes backwards, like me, until we look like him. But knowing that most of our growth is him, it's the Holy Spirit working through others and through us. So I love that we each have a very different perspective on it, but it's the same. It's knowing that it's not us. So, our last question for today is, what would you say a disciple is called to do?
I would say we're called to learn and learn from Jesus and be more like him. God has been so patient with me. And sometimes he has to drag me along, but that's what it looks like for me.
For me, being a disciple, I'm called to, like you said, Andrea, it's to know and follow Jesus, to learn his word and how I'm supposed to live that out, seeking him in all things, for all things, because of all things. It's loving God first and then loving others. It's abiding in his word. It's bearing fruit. It's serving my family and others. It's sharing the gospel in different ways, not always in big ways, not always evangelism. I have a friend that called me last night. A good friend of hers daughter had passed away unexpectedly at 12 years old, and I just stopped everything and prayed with her. And that's what we're called to do: love God, love others, and make disciples.
Absolutely. I love what John Eldridge says. He says it's bringing heaven to earth. Just came out with a new book, Experience Jesus Really. And he says it's a return to Eden. And what he means is this a spiritual restoration and a longing for renewed paradise. The human heart has an innate yearning for Eden, that perfect state of communion with God. This is not a lost paradise, but a future reality awaiting us through the restoration of all things, which can be experienced now through prayer and communion with God. And I love that Jesus and John the Baptist kept saying the kingdom is at hand. And they said that in Matthew and Mark. And what they meant is you can experience this now. You don't have to wait until you die and you experience heaven on the other side. We can bring heaven on earth now by being a disciple, by discipling, by loving, by being committed and doing everything that both of you just said. And it goes back to exactly what you said, Lori, loving God and loving others.
Yeah, I just wanted to share on this definition of disciples, and I'm learning, what it means to be a disciple. We had an interaction with one of our followers on social media, and I just asked the question, what would you say a disciple is? And she gave a beautiful definition of it. And I'll just read it. It says, a disciple of our Lord is a student who is committed to being teachable and correctable, who has counted the cost of serving him and has chosen to follow him regardless of the cost. And if you want to know what the cost is, she had previously referenced Luke chapter 14, and it's verses 25 through 35. So I'm not going to read all of those, but it's a high cost. But the bottom line is we have to love God before anything else. That's kind of hard when you look at it that way, because there's some times where that afternoon nap may be important than taking that phone call and praying with a friend who's going through something hard. So it's going to look different on different days and at different times, but yeah, putting God first. A practical way that we have to apply this, we keep mentioning the same thing. It is absolutely imperative that we are in community. The last 4 years that we've been in North Carolina have been some of the hardest, and it's because we felt so isolated, and it's been hard to find our community. Not that we haven't had some relationships with some amazing people, and I'm so thankful for each one of those seasons. And I think that's another thing that we need to take away, that these relationships and refining isn't always comfortable, and things are also for a season. And that doesn't mean that anyone, you included, is good or bad or deficient in any way. It's just God places people in our lives. So it's just absolutely imperative that you find some place to walk with people, whether that's a Bible study, whether you start there or you start going to a church and just pray for God to some extrovert, because I'm an introvert. And so I sit in the back row and I'm the first one out the door as soon as the service is over. So it's hard for people to be able to minister to me if I don't give them an opportunity to do it. So some practical challenges, guys, is just to put yourself in position to be able to be ministered to and to be able to minister to others.
I'm in full agreement with what Andrea just said. When we moved out here 6 years ago, I felt a huge void in our lives here. We had left a community where we were extremely plugged in, everything in church and in every way. And then we got here and then COVID happened and everything shut down while we were trying to find a church. Then everything just got harder in terms of trying to plug into a community because of all of the craziness. It's been incrementally harder this season to be intentional about getting back into community and getting back into trying to recreate that community that we had before. And it's always going to look different when you're in a different area. It's just always going to be different. And I get that, but you've got to be so intentional about building those relationships, building them with the Lord first, and then building them with others through church, through Bible studies. If you can't find a Bible study, start one. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. I have had so many more opportunities to minister to people's needs and tell people about Jesus outside of the church than I ever did in the church. And I feel like we're in this different season since COVID that he's just opened so many different doors to do that. There's so many opportunities to do that. If you will just listen for his voice and follow his leading, he will guide you and he will show you who needs you and what you need to say.
Definitely. So what both of you and what we've talked about in numerous ways in this episode is what the ancients called the practices. The first disciples did it, and they did it even further back as far as Genesis. And what the practices are is it's different expressions of connection with God. It can be prayer, it can be getting in the word, it can be worship, it can be community, it can be witnessing. So there's all kinds of different ways to practice what a disciple looks like, putting it into practice. So we just want to encourage you, once the study guide comes out in February, we have an entire section for each of the 12 chapters on a different practice and what it looks like, how Jesus did it, how we've seen it throughout history, biblical examples of it, and practical ways that you can put that practice into practice. So,
all right, guys. So thank you so much for joining us. We'd love to hear your thoughts about discipleship and what it means to you to follow Jesus. So drop us a line in the comments, or for a larger conversation, join us on social media. Our links are all down in the show notes below. So next time, we're going to unpack a real Proverbs 31 woman. And remember, stay curious
and keep seeking.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Also Called provides a space for honest conversations about the truth of who God is, who we are, and the relationships He wants us to have with Him, each other, the church, and ourselves. This episode was just the start of the conversation. Be sure to check the show notes for extra resources to go further. You can also find our social media sites to join the discussion. Don't miss our next chat by subscribing to our YouTube channel or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Also Called is part of Bible and Pop Culture, a crowd-funded nonprofit that allows us to provide our content to start great conversations for free. You can help us keep doing this by checking out bibleandpopculture.com or alsocalled.org's donate subscribe buttons with a one-time gift, supporting us monthly, or sharing us with someone who might like the conversation. Thank you for being a part, and see you next conversation.